Welcome to the NABS Now Podcast, brought to you by the National Association of Blind Students, a proud division of the National Federation of the Blind.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the NABS Now Podcast. I'm your host Nina, and I'm super excited to have Seyoon co-hosting again today with me as well. Today we are talking all about performing arts, and I'd love to give a huge shout out to our special guests, Elizabeth Rouse, DJ Robinson, Francesco Magisano, and Julie McGinnity. From dance to theater to music and everything in between, our special guests have covered a lot of performing arts and have some awesome experiences to share. So let's jump right in.
Joining us today is Elizabeth Rouse. How are you doing, Elizabeth?
I'm well, Seyoon. How are you?
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about yourself for our listeners.
Absolutely. So my name is Elizabeth. I'm a senior in college right now, just about to finish up at Central College in Pella, Iowa. I'm originally from a really small town called Durant. Tiny town, population not even to exceed 1,500. Born and raised with my brother, my mom, and my dad. Pella is the farthest I've ever lived from home as of right now. So I've been at Central for 4 years studying English and theater. My ultimate goal, though, is to attend law school after attending a training program at the Louisiana Center for the Blind, hopefully starting this August or September to get to the ultimate goal. So studying for the LSAT while I'm attending training. Maybe I'll get into Harvard. Who knows?
Big ambitions.
That's so awesome. The LSAT. Oh, Lord.
Yeah.
So can you describe your connection to performing arts?
Absolutely. So I have been involved in the performing arts since I was in 7th grade when I took the voluntary route of participating in choir. I was pretty much a music theater nerd all of high school. I've been in adaptations of Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, crossed over with Jersey Shore, and I've been in children's productions. So I have a pretty wide range of performing arts experience on stage. But during my years of college, I've been really, really lucky to be able to kind of get all around the stage too. I've been an actor, I've been a director, I've been a sound designer, I've been a stage manager. So I've been around a time or two in whatever aspect of the theater I'm faced with. I even got to work on stage construction last semester. So a lot of fun, musicals, straight plays, you name it, and I'm involved in it.
Have you ever faced the notion that blind students cannot perform alongside sighted peers? If so, how did you adapt to this notion if you experienced it at all?
Unfortunately, I have faced the reality that I was at a disadvantage because of my blindness. This is a personal kind of assumption on my part. At my school, there's main stage productions. There's usually 3 per year, sometimes 4. 2 of whom are directed by one of our theater professors and one of which is directed by another professor. And the professor who usually does 2 shows a year, I think, has never really point blank asked me what my sight limitations are. So he's never come to terms with the fact that just because I can't necessarily see where I'm going on stage doesn't mean I can't act like I know where I'm going on stage. Whereas my other professor, Mary Jo Sod, does a really great job and has since I was a first semester freshman of asking and trying to understand my limitations. So for example, when I did the show Anonymous, the stage itself was in an alley formation. And by this, that means if I'm standing on one side of the stage and I hold up my left hand and I hold up my right hand, that's where the audience is. They're not in front of me or behind me. It's kind of like a tennis court. You have to play to both sides of the audience. But the platform itself, that was the stage, was 3 feet off the ground. And I wasn't using my cane at all. I was not supposed to be portraying a blind person on stage. So the first thing I remember Dr. Sod asking me in our auditions was, "Do you trust me?" Which is incredibly unnerving for an actor, specifically because the answer is yes, absolutely. I wholeheartedly trust you, Dr. Sod. But it's not the easiest thing to put your trust in your physical safety in someone else's hands. So I adapted as necessary by feeling the stage with my feet, spending some quality time in the stage or on the stage environment, right, with me, myself, and the empty seating banks. I definitely had some instances where I almost fell off. But I was able to regain my footing. People watching the show didn't even know that I had an issue seeing. They didn't notice me almost fall off the stage. Thank God. It's definitely kind of hard. I mean, the thing that people have to learn in the performing arts is if you have an actor with a disability on stage, ask them about it. We know our limitations better than anyone, right? So we don't want you to assume yes or no, I can or cannot complete that action. Because most of the time I'm going to say, heck yeah, I can do it. Just let me figure out a way to do it. So I faced a little bit more of that adversity with one of my professors than the other. But even he started to get the hang of my attitude and my stage presence. And I was able to kind of mend that relationship. I've run the ticket booth for his shows before. I've sound designed for at least 2 of his shows. So we got over it. But I mean, to this day, I don't think he fully understands that I can do anything he needs me to do on stage. It's just going to be thinking of an alternative technique.
So I want to follow up a little bit more on the sound design aspect. And while this is not directly related to, say, performance on the stage, obviously the backstage crew is just as important in the theatrical industries. And that's something that blind students may want to pursue in that area. How did you adapt to working with sound in the backstage?
Yes.
If you want to tell us a little more about that.
Sound design is not easy. It's looking relentlessly through a script and finding every sound cue, every transition, every place where auditory balance is needed, in or out of the script. Sometimes you can put in things that aren't even called for. And you use an electronic platform. At my school, it's QLab. And to put it very nicely, QLab is not accessible. I actually remember having to sit with my professors and we would find clips of the audio cues we would want, and we would have to cut them second by second, nanosecond by nanosecond to get them to what we wanted them to be. And I remember spending 15, 20 minutes maybe perfecting the sound of a glass hitting the ground and breaking. We spent even more time than that on transition cues for certain characters, for instance. I do remember also visiting the QLab booth at the USITT conference, which is United States Institute of Theater Technology or Technology Theater. I can never remember. And I said, I'd like to talk to the man who created QLab, thinking like, okay, he's not even here. And they're like, okay, yeah, we'll go get him. And I was like, okay, perfect. So I'll wait. And he walks over and I said, do you know that you're at risk for being sued by every person with a disability who uses your software? And he just kind of looked at me. There was this really
Incredible
awkward silence.
Work there.
Exactly. There's this just really awkward silence.
Wow.
And he goes, Sam, I need you to give this girl my card. She's going to be one of our new product testers. And that is how I changed the world of sound design.
Incredible.
Yes, it's definitely a work in progress, but QLab is specifically for Apple Mac products. The creator of QLab doesn't really believe in branching out to PC, so we've got a lot of issues, but I think tackling QLab's inaccessibility is the first step to making the sound design field a little bit more accessible. If you're doing physical sound backstage, I mean, who doesn't want to shake a box full of silverware to make a crash box, right? There's a lot of different elements to sound design, but electronic sound design can be its own beast.
So you kind of already answered this, but are there any other accommodations that you've used or modifications that you used that you think could be helpful to other students?
I think the 2 biggest accommodations or modifications that I encountered that worked best for me were to first spend some quality time on the stage by yourself and get used to it as more things get added. So I've been in shows where every single time there's a set piece or a piece of furniture moved or added to the set, our technical director will pull me either out of class or grab me from the green room when I'm doing homework and say, hey, I want to show you this. And we've had some great exploration. We've had me giving myself a concussion on a spiral staircase on the cabaret set. So definitely spend some one-on-one time with your set. I think the second thing that I could really advocate for students to do is spend some quality time with your director. Whether you're acting or stage managing or designing in any way, shape, or form, have some candid conversations about what you'd like to try, what you think you're going to be really good at, what you think you're going to be really bad at, and find a way to challenge yourself. Performing arts is all about a growing role throughout a performance, whether you're on or off stage. And if you go into a show and come out of a show the same person, you didn't do something right. So having those expectations for yourself and then asking other people to have like growing and higher expectations for you, I think is also a really important part of the performing arts for me.
Oh, absolutely. I think that courage I think your story with the QLab is quite inspirational for a lot of sound designers or prospective sound designers that are discouraged maybe by hearing about the lack of accessible piece of that software.
Yeah. I mean, the old saying goes, right? If it ain't broke, don't fix it. QLab's broke. Let's fix it.
Oh, absolutely. So here's a little bit of a fun part to move on from QLabs and accessibility. What would you say is your performing arts memory that jumps out to you or it would be your favorite?
I think the performing arts memory that stands out to me as the most memorable would be during a run of the show Anonymous, which is a present day modernized version of Homer's Odyssey, but instead of a husband and father being separated from his wife and son, it's a mother and a son being separated because of the refugee crisis.
There was a war, and my son and me, we escaped. We escaped in the middle of the night. We sailed out to sea in an old fishing boat. There were so many people all crammed together. Old people and little babies. We huddled together in the dark in the belly of the ship. We listened to the roar of the waves. We listened to the boat creak and moan. And then the storm started.
And it's the story of Nemasani and Anan finding their way back to each other. And I was super fortunate to be cast in the role of Nemasani, and my friend Nash was playing Anan. And I remember I was a second semester freshman in college. I was terrified. It was my first main stage show. And at the end of the first night of our first performance, Nash and I are supposed to hug in this last scene. And this has always been kind of goofy for us. I mean, we were acting partners in our first acting class, and I love Nash to death. He's a great guy. So we get into this very tight, like mother-son moment, right? And he whispers in my ear and he goes, "I'm so nervous." It's like, I can't break on stage now. This is the last 2 minutes of the show. Like, why are you still nervous? It's over. And Nash is obsessed with High School Musical. So to calm him down, I started quoting High School Musical to him. And he's like, "Don't you dare do this to me. I can't laugh right now. I can't."
Great execution there.
And we worked through it. So neither one of us broke character, but neither one of us was nervous at the end of the night. So I think stuff like that, like getting to know the people that you're on stage with and laughing and crying at the end of a show because you're so sad that you don't get to spend time with these amazing people anymore. I think that's kind of the best and worst part of being in performing arts, honestly.
Right. Great. I really appreciate you jumping on this podcast and sharing your valuable input for our students who are already in performing arts field or prospective students who are potentially wanting to expand their performing arts interest.
I think more students need to get in the field. Absolutely.
Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the Performing Arts Division of the National Federation of the Blind. This is a great place to connect with both experienced and new performers. And here to talk a little bit more about the division is its president, Julie McGinnity.
My name is Julie McGinnity, and I'm the president of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division. I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the division and what we do, and I want to start by talking about why the division is so important to me as a performer and as a blind person. I was reading a book the other day and a blind character showed up, and I was kind of appalled at how the blind character was treated. And I wonder if you guys can relate to that. If you find the representation of blindness in the movies you watch and the TV shows and other media that you consume, like if you find that characterization to be unrealistic to our lived experiences as blind people in general. Sure, some authors do a great job. Some writers did their research and they learned about blindness from the experts, blind people. but a lot of them don't. And a lot of actors who are set to play blind characters are not blind themselves, and they don't play their roles authentically. And that is a huge concern of the National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division, and it's one of our great goals, particularly in the advocacy space, to really change the tone of the entertainment industry so that blind people are represented authentically, so that our stories are given truth, so that we aren't misrepresented as, tragic and helpless and all those other things that do not reflect the overall lived experience of a lot of blind people. So that's why I'm a member of this division, and that's ultimately why I wanted to take on leadership in this division as well. We have a series of activities that we're pretty much constantly creating at this point throughout this quarantine time. We're doing dance workshops and improv workshops and all kinds of things over Zoom, and we're finding that to be very engaging. But the National Federation of the Blind National Convention, you bet, every year we've got a talent show. I know we're famous for that. We should be. The talent show is great. Dance workshops and other activities. Last year we had an acting workshop led by an acclaimed blind actor, so that was pretty exciting. So we seek to do a few things. I already talked about the advocacy, but what I haven't talked about yet are the network and the activities that we do for blind people and blind performers, both professional and just hobbyists too. So we're a network of blind people who are interested in the performing arts. So singer, yes. Dancer, yes. Screenwriter, yes, actually. Audio engineer, yes. So if you are interested in the performing arts, if you are interested in having a career that is related to the performing arts, whether you are interested in directing movies or being in them, the division is for you. And we would like to hear from you and work with you and help you to build your network through us. The other thing we seek to do every year at the National Convention is we always work on an agenda that is full of activities to give you experience. Blind people are often left out of dance class. Oh, it's too visual, you can't see it, blah, 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 right? No, that's not true. Our vice president, Caitlin McIntyre, is a ballroom dancer, and she is really great at describing the steps and how you need to move and how you need to put your hands and all those things that we tend to be overwhelmed about and think is too complicated. So we want to give you that experience so you can go out in your community after convention and say, no, I can do a ballroom dance. I can act. I did this workshop and it's totally fun. I can do improv. So that is our goal. I hope that you join us. I hope that you follow us on social media, National Federation of the Blind Performing Arts Division on Facebook, and feel free to contact us through our email address, nfbpad@gmail.com, and connect with us on Facebook as well. Please look in the coming days. We're going to start a Facebook group. Yay, to network more of you, to work with as many of you as we can find, and speak up about blindness in entertainment, because this is why we have our division, so that all of our voices can be heard on the topic of authentic representation in the entertainment industry, getting blind people out there on stage and on screen. Thank you.
Joining us for a Performing Arts Podcast is another guest. We are delighted to have DJ here in the virtual studio. How are you doing, DJ?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
Fantastic. So tell us a little bit about what you do.
So I am a current senior at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte, where I'm pursuing a degree in exercise science and dance performance. I have been dancing since I was 12, but I really just hit the ground running when I got here 4 years ago. And since then, I've been exposed to a plethora of opportunities that have taken me abroad, that has taken me nationwide doing various conferences and various dancing events, and that would have allowed me to kind of build my craft as a blind dancer in the country. And so, but I've really been able to hone in my craft here at the university. 2 years ago, I created a dance workshop, Sensory Beyond Sight, that helps sighted dancers or anybody who claims they're not a mover or don't know how to move, foster a deeper understanding of body awareness while they're under blindfold. It helps them to step away from anything that has to do with self-esteem and embrace self-acceptance. So I've also recently just got into Duke University's master's program to go study an MFA in dance.
Oh my gosh, congratulations.
Thank you. With concentration in education. We'll be creating a course curriculum course that will help dance educators and educators alike become more equipped for building more inclusive and accessible class structures and class environments for persons with disabilities, particularly blindness.
Now, where have you traveled to?
So I've been abroad in Italy. About 2 summers ago, I studied abroad in Moncavo and Torino and studied at some prestigious dance conservatories there, which I had the opportunity to train in ballet, contemporary dance, and also modern dance techniques. But I've also traveled up and down the coast, whether it was New York, a lot of New York, a lot of North Carolina, some places in South Carolina, just to name a few. Recently, last summer, I performed at the Alhambra Ballroom in Harlem, and I presented my dance workshops, performed at this Alexandria Dance Conference in New York City. So to some educators and professionals in the dancing world. So that was pretty cool.
Oh, fantastic.
That's awesome. What styles of dance do you typically do?
So right now, this past semester, I just trained in ballet, which is not my go-to. It's what I've just done because my major is just, it's really beautiful. It helps me stay limber and flexible and really disciplined. But my go-tos would have to be improvisation, contemporary jazz, and hip-hop, along with tap and ballet. But right now, this time, I'm doing a lot of improvisation and contemporary dance mixed with a little hip-hop. So just depends on the mood.
Fantastic. What would you say is your highlight or your favorite memory that you could recall besides traveling? Because traveling is the best, let's face it.
Yeah. Oh, man. There's a lot.
We'll narrow it down to maybe top 3.
My number one top 3 is me being able to perform on a collegiate college stage. My first time 3 years ago, I performed with a group of cast members from my department in a piece titled Breaking Points, which looked at different moments in our life where we had breakthrough. So the choreographer, his name is Marcus White. He's a professor at Arizona State University, and he also has he's based out of Detroit. It was my first ever big choreographer that we worked with, and so it was kind of one of those highlights for me. How was I going to do this? How was he going to make it work around me? But there was some growing pains, but there were also some really successful and insightful moments because it allowed me to understand how I would manipulate the space with a group of other dancers. But it was really beautiful to see us come together and them help me throughout the process and make it pretty much invisible for them helping me. Secondly, I would have to say presenting my workshops as a Sensory Beyond Sight at Columbia University last summer was a really big highlight because it was really something. When I created this workshop, it was just a means of a service project that I did because I received the Benjamin Gilman Scholarship, International Scholarship, to go to Italy 2 years ago. So I had needed a service project. So this was just something that I developed just for that. But then it became something much bigger. Outside of that, that's been really, really amazing. But really, my top memory is just last year, I had an opportunity. There's this organization called Arts Access. Mm-hmm. It's out of Cary, North Carolina, and it showcases persons with disabilities in the arts. And I got to perform with a company out of Durham, North Carolina called Shalee Dance Works, and a young lady named Janie, and she has cerebral palsy and she's visually impaired. And she loves to dance. And I didn't understand at the brink of how that was going to work. I had a duet portion with my dance mentor, Lily Willis, who's now in London studying the conservatory there. I went through that process. I really was able to see how I could mesh my artistic creativity in with other sighted dancers. But then when I got opportunity to dance with Jane, who has no use of her legs, but only her upper body, I began to look at dance in a whole different light because I could feel her body. I could feel her movements. I mimicked and mirrored her movements as she went. And it was just this negotiation of two bodies in space that I was able to support her using her limbs to help manipulate her movement. She and I doing various sequences together became this negotiation, not only of two bodies in space, but a negotiation of artistic creativity at its finest and really expressing the transformation future of what dance will look like in the future for persons with disabilities.
Wow.
That's awesome. So I know a lot of people consider dance to be a very visual performing art. Have you ever faced the notion that blind students cannot perform equally as sighted peers? And if so, how have you dealt with this misconception?
So yes, dance is a visual art form. It very is. But over the last several years, I made it my goal to understand two things. A, what it means to witness dance from the non-visual standpoint, and B, how can I coexist in a space with other individuals that are sighted and do it in a manner where everyone feels safe and that I have this equal opportunity. So the first thing is that just this past year, my senior seminar class, I had to go to a performance. It was an art installation piece. And it's called Material Deviance. And this piece was about bringing people brought pieces of them together, and they set up this whole elaborate space where people brought their old things that they wanted to throw away, and each dancer during the piece used that piece to manipulate their movements and things. And so I got to feel what the set felt like and understood what the set felt like. And so I have a dance mentor, and the dance mentor helps me by describing the sets to me, by describing movement to me, and she will go write up notes, copious notes from what she's seen. Then she and I will talk about it. But this time around, because I knew the background of the scene, there was also music, and there was a music score involved. There was movement. It was a very quiet, intimate space. So because of that space, it allowed me to take into account the environment, the temperature. It allowed me to take into account the music, but also I could hear movement and things that I had never been able to see before. So what I realized is that dance outside of the visual lens can be witnessed and interpreted just through your own interpretation of what you hear in the space. So you could hear the banging of a chair. You could hear the stomping of a foot. You could hear someone singing or doing a dialogue or that crumpling a bag. Those can be artistic means of choreography for you, or says something to you in the grand scheme of things. In that lens, I was like, wow, I finally found a way that I could do this. However, if I'm on a premium stage, a Brazilian stage, like a actual going to a Broadway show, that's a little harder because I'm sitting in seats that's kind of sloped down like you go to see an opera or something, and the stage is far out. So then that's a little different because it's not as intimate, and I had to rely heavily on my dance mentor to describe certain elements, or I go to Broadway shows or some kind of other shows, things where there's audio described. There's also tours. My whole experience has been tours that I've been on when I went to go see dance performance, where I met with the dancers one-on-one, or I have been able to conceptualize and come up with other avenues in that as I'm going on tours, checking out the scene, and they would show us choreography. And I would have that. So every time a piece would come up, that piece, I would have a bit of what that choreography was going to look like. And it would give me a better insight into what I was actually going to witness in front. Now, as far as that be having the same equal access, is that my dance mentor is there with me. I'm there, particularly, I'll just say ballet. Ballet is a little bit easier in a sense because I'm not structured, really structured, really detailed. There's a bar and then there's center combinations. Those center combinations build on top of one another. So for me, my dance mentor stands on one side of me, behind me, or in front of me. And during those moments, I already know particular ballet sequences and ballet terminology. And so because of that, I know what to do. But when it comes to really getting the combinations, my dance mentor is reminding me, okay, this is what the combination is. We're going to go for it. And when the teacher goes for the said, let's go, I can do it and I'm good. But when I'm trying to learn choreography, that negotiation of movement is a little different because then it takes my mentor letting me be hands-on with her while she shows me the movement in her body, or she shows me one move at a time. Then we go from there. So from that process, that's how that tends to work out for me. So Yeah.
I know there are plenty of guide dog users that are perhaps already in the field of performance or already performing on stage. What do you do with your
Yeah.
guide dog since you have a guide dog yourself?
So it depends on the setting and what in which I am presenting. Most of the time, if I'm performing myself or I'm going to watch, if I'm going to watch, then yes, I can take him with me and I sit him by my seat like normal. But if I'm performing, I tend to, if I'm at a place where I can keep him back, then I'll keep him back because of two reasons. A, there's constant shuffle of chaos behind the stage during setup, plethora of different elements during backstage changing of sets and people going all over the place. So that can be kind of stressful for Charlie, which is my guide dog. Also, I've kept him in the changing rooms at times, and that's worked to a degree. But sometimes if it's an unfamiliar area for him and he hasn't been there a lot, he gets kind of stressed out, gets a little anxious. So
I would imagine.
Yeah. So again, it just depends on where I'm at. My dance mentor, which I normally have them with me, then they kind of keep watch of him for me, and it limits the stress and anxiety for him, but also for myself. So,
well, DJ, we appreciate you joining us to talk about your experience. It's certainly one of the kind because I don't know that many performers that are into dancing as passionately as you are. Definitely appreciate you coming on this podcast.
It was a pleasure. It was an honor. I'm always looking for ways to share my experiences through as a dancer, as a blind dancer for that matter, but also so that other persons who are blind or vision impaired can understand whatever preconceived notions that they've had about their aspirations to dance or to even further that in training. It's not limitless, but endless. It's just taking the right people, taking the right pattern to get there. So I think, again, this was a great opportunity, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Our third performer is coming from the great state of New York. How are you doing, Francesco?
I'm doing really well.
So, tell us a little bit about what you do and how you have connection to performing arts.
Yeah, so I've been in music since I was a little kid, and I mean, through all the years I've stuck with it. I do a mixture of teaching and performing, and I do stuff from rock music to heavy metal to some alternative stuff.
Wow, that's a wide range of genres.
Very, very diverse. This is how it keeps things interesting. I wear a few different hats. So I race triathlons and cycling races for Team USA. I work for Achilles International, which is a nonprofit geared in the athletic space.
That's awesome. Have you ever faced the notion that blind students can't perform alongside sighted peers? And if so, how did you deal with that?
For the most part, it was based on just not really being aware of just blindness as a whole. And like, so all the people I play with regularly, it's totally normal. But if I meet someone new, they might have a moment of being like, oh, who's this guy? Like, how's he able to, do this? But honestly, the biggest trouble is before we start playing. Once we start playing, everything's fine.
What kind of modifications or adaptation do you generally utilize when performing?
The most simplest thing I use is 2 little pieces of tape behind the neck of the guitar, and that's just to feel like what frets I'm on. And I know like sighted guitarists that I've taught that trick to, because most of the time when you're performing, it's in the dark. So whether you're blind or not, being able to feel where you are on the guitar neck is really useful. So that's probably the biggest thing I use.
I want to try that. That's a really good idea.
If you use Braille, like the labeling paper, if you like cut a little strip of that, that's really, really good for that.
There you go.
Yeah, because it's really easy to lose your spot there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
What would you say is your favorite performing arts memory or experience?
Oh, that's a heavy question.
It's a loaded question, isn't it?
That's a very loaded question. My favorite performing arts memory is probably just showing up to some really ranchy clubs and bars and just not being sure of like, is this safe to like go down these stairs and rickety wiring in bars, and just the type of characters you meet too, like just nothing else, man. Nothing else compares.
So I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
What advice would you give another student who's maybe hesitant about performing, or kind of how they will be seen as a blind performer?
Honestly, it sounds so oversaid, but just you got to think like worst case scenario, right? Like, what do you have to lose? Like, nothing's got to lose. Just go up, and if everything else fails, just make a fool of yourself, and that way you already got that out the way, and then you don't have to worry about it. Like, well, when I was in school, my first teacher in high school, he made all of us get up and just yell at the top of our lungs. And he was like, all right, you've embarrassed yourself as much as possible.
Brilliant.
Now go up and sing. And there's no way, you know? So I don't know. I mean, just, you know, just go, just be yourself, just be strong, be good, stay gold.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the NABS Now podcast. A huge thank you to our special guests as well as my co-host Seiyun. Feel free to check out all of our previous episodes, and we'll be bringing you another episode next month.